Time for the penultimate PGA DFS event of the year. This week, it is the RSM Classic out at Sea Island Resort. Couple different courses on the menu for this week. We're going to break it down and let you know who to target for PGA DFS. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gdula. He is the managing editor for numberFire.com. Brandon, Dustin Johnson putting on the green jacket in impressive fashion this past weekend. So how are you doing?
Personally, I like Dustin. I'm glad that he won. But I had exposure on a lot of different guys from either a betting purpose or a daily fantasy purpose. And, it just felt like Dustin Johnson was going to be the most popular, more popular than Bryson. He was on FanDuel overall. It wasn't egregiously so, but I was like, well, if people are kind of looking at Dustin instead of Bryson, I'll just play Bryson. Didn't work out, but it was nice to see Dustin Johnson get emotional.
Yeah, it was very strange and jarring, I think is the right way to put it. I was big on Brooks, as we talked about on Thursday's podcast, or Tuesday's, last Monday's, I don't know, whatever day it is. Last Monday's podcast, I had a lot of Brooks. And if you told me that he finished 7th or so, I would have felt, okay, that's good process, but it never felt like he was ever competitive, I guess, outside of for 5 minutes on Friday when we were tilting about, live betting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Outside of that, it never felt like 7th is good, but I never felt like I was truly in it with that, I guess.
Yeah. It was I won't call it a straight backdoor top 10, but it was almost like a Xander thing.
Well, it kind of was. I think that's fair.
But the thing is, as somebody who had a lot of interest in Brooks, he got a lot of bad breaks. I feel like a lot of golfers, for even as easy as, easy compared to Augusta standards, as easy as it played, there were some bad breaks for some guys. It felt like, John Rahm was, I think it was 8. He was just whacking it off trees. Dustin Thomas got wet. Brooks hit the flag and kicked back. Dustin Johnson didn't seem like he had any of those issues, which is kind of what you need to kind of forge ahead in a field like that. But Brooks was better than expected. I think there were just a few bad breaks for him. So I don't think I'm fully off of Brooks for April, though.
No, I'm definitely not either. You mentioning JT reminded me that my wife was on my computer. We were ordering food Friday, and a message came in over Slack from you that said, "JT wet, man, forget this." And she's like, "What does that mean?" Don't worry about it. But it was fun to see DJ win. I wish it had been a bit closer. It did get close kind of during the early part of Sunday, but it was never really Cam Smith, good for him. That was a good run. So at least made it semi-competitive, but congrats to DJ. And I am looking forward to another Masters again in April when there is no football for me to tilt during the Masters. Let's take a look here at the RSM Classic. As mentioned, it is the second to last event of the 2020 calendar year. There is no event next week for Thanksgiving. There is an event the week after that. We're going to have a PGA podcast for that one. Then we'll pick back up in January once they get back cooking once again. Next week, we'll still have 3 podcasts here on the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast. We're going to have the recap podcast Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern on YouTube. We're going to have a Thanksgiving 3-game slate podcast on Tuesday at 10 a.m. And then our regular main slate preview will be Wednesday at 10 a.m. So make sure to subscribe to the FanDuel YouTube page, but we will be live there 9 a.m. Monday, 10 a.m. Tuesday and Wednesday. So a lot of good stuff coming your way here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed and on the FanDuel YouTube page. The RSM Classic is at Sea Island Resort. It takes place on 2 separate courses. The Seaside course is 7,005 yards. It is a par 70. The Plantation course is 7,060 yards. It is a par 72. And the way this works is if you'll play 1 round of each course, Thursday and Friday, then the 2 weekend rounds will both be on the Seaside course. And it's relevant who is playing where when, because there's a lot of wind in the forecast for this week. And Brandon, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I believe the Seaside course is more susceptible to wind narratively, correct?
I think that's the what's out there.
Okay.
I'm not a wind expert. It's one of my biggest shortcomings, but I believe that's the case. I'll try to dig into it and tweet about it.
Yeah, so I think that's something to keep in note because there is a lot of wind this week. I actually have wind numbers on my sheet for this week just because it does seem like wind will be a factor. And it's going to be a tough event because there are about 150 golfers in the field, which means that as little as 43% of the field could wind up making the cut. Just top 65 plus ties once again. So that's tough, and it's going to make things pretty difficult. So, Brandon, when we're trying to find guys who will make the cut and potentially get us a good finish, maybe overcome that wind, which number should we be honing in on?
Yeah, so, I mean, with the two-course split, this event's always a little strange because we have shot length data on the Seaside course. So we get, for guys who make the cut, we get it for 3 rounds, but not the other, and like that is a little bit strange. But, I mean, we still have long enough sample and enough rounds to kind of figure things out. And kind of at the top, we know scores have to go low. You got to be, the past winners have been 19 under, 19, 21, 17, 22 under. So, I mean, this is not a course where you're grinding out par. 5 under is not going to do it. You got to score. And as we talk about pretty often, that puts a lot of golfers in contention because if it's scoreable, kind of everybody can score. You don't just, because you're good, eagle par 4s all of a sudden. Those are probably birdie opportunities for everybody. So that really does alter the way that I view a field. And if you look at the winners, most of the leaderboards are kind of shorter hitters who hit fairways, which I think is a little possibly misleading. It's just because these are short courses, scoreable. That's when we see kind of everybody in the mix or able to be in the mix. And there have been a few big hitters. Cam Champ, Luke List has been, I think they were top 10 last year. But so like distance isn't bad, but I think hitting fairways is a plus. So really what all that boils down to is just look at strokes gained off the tee. I don't really see why you wouldn't. And then also factor in some accuracy. Strokes gained off the tee does kind of, distance leads to strokes gained off the tee more than just hitting fairways. But, I'll have accuracy and strokes gained off the tee on the list. Strokes gained approach is still number one, always. You have to have your irons dialed in to get to birdie chances. So you can't really make birdies without hitting your irons well. So that's on the list. That's at the top of the list. So my key stats, I know is a little bit rambly, but I'll kind of get to the same few stats we've been targeting on scoreable courses. Strokes gained approach, strokes gained off the tee with an emphasis more on accuracy than distance. Strokes gained putting on Bermuda if you have access to that, and then birdie or better rate. These are things that are going to matter this week.
So I think there are some guys who I am okay with not being super accurate, but they're kind of like the exceptions. For the most part, I do want accuracy because you go back to 2018. The way that I do this is I look at golfers who finished like top 20 or so and where they ranked for the full season in various PGA Tour stats. And in 2017, 3 golfers in the top 20 were inside the top 100 for the full season in driving distance, whereas 3 were outside the top 100 in driving accuracy. And like that split was present all 3 years from 2017, 2018, 2019. So I think that I might be a little bit heavier on distance. But I think the bigger thing for me is heavier on accuracy. The bigger thing for me is if I can find golfers who A, are accurate and B, make a lot of birdies. That's really intriguing to me. So like if we get the mesh of like accuracy and birdies are better gained, that's really intriguing because it means that they can make birdies even on non-accuracy courses. So I think that's kind of the angle that I want to play for this week is try to find guys who can do well in those 2 areas because that factors in so much stuff. So I think that's kind of the key for me. It's not going to be a huge list, obviously, because like it's tough to make birdies if you're just, plunking it in the middle of the fairway 15 yards down the course. But still, I think that that's kind of the if I'm just going to make a shortcut, I think that's the way I go.
Yeah, I think, it's really easy to overcomplicate, PGA DFS, looking at things like, scoring on par fours between 400 and 450 yards, and I fell down that rabbit hole a bit, but I don't necessarily know if that's super predictive, especially if you're not adjusting for how difficult those holes are, how they're set up, things like that. So I think kind of keeping it more basic is the right way to go long term. Accuracy does matter more. I think we're just on that page. This is a rare event where that's the case. But again, I don't think if you're errant, you have to be long. So I want to make that caveat. So there might be some bigger hitters I'm still in on, specifically one we both like in Sam Burns.
Again, we liked Sam Burns a couple weeks ago. We are back on the train this week, and I think that he's kind of like the one guy who I'm like, okay, I can make an exception here, and I think that's the smart way to play things. We'll talk about golfers who have done well at this unique layout previously, but first, FanDuel Sportsbook is giving users an opportunity to win big on this week's Thursday Night Football matchup between Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, and Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks, in case you didn't know for which teams those players play. Right now, you have a chance to bet $5 on either the Cardinals or the Seahawks at 25-1, and if you win, you'll make $125. You heard that correctly. Bet $5, win $125. The offer is for this Thursday's game only. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook mobile app, sign up, and make your first deposit to see your enhanced odds today. Must be 21 plus and present in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Colorado, West Virginia, Tennessee, or Indiana. New users only. Must wager on designated boost markets. Deposit required. Max bonus $125. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in Colorado, call 1-800-522-4700. In West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. Indiana, call 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Or in Tennessee, call the Tennessee Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. Let's take a look at golfers who have done well at the RSM Classic in the past. And we should start things off here with the headliner for this week. That is Webb Simpson, because Webb obviously is a very good golfer in like a good field, but not a great field. And he has really good course history. So let's start things off here with Webb, Brandon, and talk about how we are handling him in general, because I think that's kind of the place you need to start for this week.
Yeah, I think everything starts with Webb Simpson and what you're doing with him. He's the class of the field. It's a better field than I anticipated going in. I was just so locked in on the Masters that I didn't really look ahead at all. But I
think it's a better field than we've had in the past for the RSM Classic. I don't know if that's a false take, but I think it seems better than past ones.
Yeah, digging back through my past notes, it feels like it has a little more to it. But Webb has finished 5 starts here, 7th, 41st, 36th, but then 3rd and 2nd the past 2 years. He's gained at least 4 strokes tee to green in all of them. But remember, that shows just 3 rounds of data for total strokes you can figure out, but the more granular stuff, the tee to green stats you can't really separate without shot link. Simpson's also a god tier Bermuda putter, so he has that going for him. He's coming off a 10th place finish at the Masters. Definitely a course that does not suit his game quite like what he gets this week. Prior to that, he has finished top 20 in 6 events, mostly all difficult fields. Honestly, if you look at Webb, the only thing he doesn't do amazingly is just launch it. He's probably, if not the best, definitely one of the best golfers. If distance were not a factor, Webb might be the number 1 in the world, basically.
If you transport Webb to 7 years ago,
before that even, but that's basically what he does. And if you don't have to be long, he's just a phenomenal golfer. So he's going to be popular. We know that, but chalky studs are best to play in non-elite fields. This field's solid. There's some depth to it. It's not elite. So I don't think this is at all similar to something like a major like we had last week, where there are a lot of alternatives. I think Webb is by far the number 1. As much as I love fading the chalk, it doesn't make as much sense based on the analysis I've done on optimal lineups over the past few years on FanDuel. So it's not a question of are you playing Webb, it's how much Webb is too much Webb Simpson.
I mean, it kind of depends on like your personal process. My personal process is if I have a situation like this where one guy is clearly that far ahead of the field, I'm comfortable going like 70% and just like allowing that 30% to be my differentiation. I know that differs from a lot of people, but like for my personal process, that's the way I'll play things with Webb this week. He's the first guy you plug in for cash games, I think, and then for tournaments, I think like 70% is right, just because he's a great overall golfer, like you mentioned, but he benefits so much from a course like this that it makes sense that the course history is what it is. Webb, I mentioned that I want guys who are accurate, but also make birdies in general. And Webb is 15th in fairways gained over the past 50 rounds per Fantasy National, and also 5th in birdies or better gained. So he fits that to a T. He's just a good golfer, so I have no reasons to not use Webb, I guess.
Yeah, I think that it's just load up on Webb. If you're playing one lineup, I think Webb's the play, unless you're playing like a single entry tournament, and then you say, well, you know, if Webb's going to be on 45%, maybe 50% of lineups, then you can get some leverage. But if it's like a head-to-head, don't even question it.
Just play the 5v5.
Yeah, and then in multi-entry, I'm with you. It's a week to be heavy on Webb because he'll probably cap out at about 50% at the most, might be like 45%. I would be overweight on that in multi-entry.
I agree. So Webb's a pretty easy one for this week, I think, and that's helpful. We're going to talk about what you do after Webb throughout the podcast for today. And I think that one route you could take is going balanced after going Webb, you know, jumping down for your second golfer, going with a lower salary guy or, you know, like a 10,000-ish type guy. And one of those guys could be Kevin Kisner. So let's talk about him here because he is a past winner at the RSM Classic. He got that win back in 2016 and feels like a course fit because since then, Kisner has been here all 4 years. It has been feast or famine with 2 missed cuts, but then also 2 top 10s. Kisner was like, the missed cut last year was not fluky. He was legit bad. He actually gained strokes putting in his one round at Seaside. So Kisner's course history has ups, but it definitely has downs as well. The stats are solid for Kisner, and he was 14th at the Zozo, but he's also 10-5. So it's not like he's a value. And I think this tier is really good, which may push me more towards that Webb plus balance type of build. Brandon, when you decide to do that, like you're in this 10,000 range, is Kisner someone you will land on?
Yeah, he's one of the few who kind of stands out. You mentioned he's a former winner. He's a local. The irons are pretty solid, 28th over the past 50 rounds, according to Fantasy National. We know he's accurate enough. Good Bermuda putter. I'm not factoring this in, but he really does struggle around the green, which is not something that I would think of when I think of Kevin Kisner. Because we've mentioned it the few times that Kisner is particularly relevant. We don't play him a lot necessarily, so his statistical profile is not one that I have at the forefront of my mind. But I think he's fine. I don't think he's a priority. I would say he's one of the better plays in the 10,000 range, but I'm probably not going to be here that much because I will want Webb. I will want someone else probably in the 11,000 range.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the 9,000 range is okay, but I might just bump down. So like, I'm probably not going to be as balanced as I typically am.
Yeah, I think that when I do go balanced too, Kisner's not going to be the first person I go to. There are guys like they're higher salaried, but like Harris English at 11 and Matt Fitzpatrick at 10-9 are both guys I'd rather have, and I'd rather, you know, find the salary to get to versus definitely for Kisner at 10-5. So if I like somehow wind up at 10-5, like if there's an extreme value I really like and I wind up at 10-5 for my final slot, sure, I'll take Kisner. But like you said, not a priority and not the first guy I'd turn to in this tier. So on the list, but not someone, like if he's not my player pool, I'm not going to shed a tear over that. Let's move down to Austin Cook, Brandon. Another guy who has won at this course previously. He is $9,600. What are you seeing with Cook at that salary?
Yeah, he won here 3 years ago and then followed that up with an 11th and a 61st. So solid, not totally flawless, but that's 3 made cuts. 9,600 is a solid salary. Now, he does some of what we should be looking for here. He's 18th in strokes gained off the tee, 13th in fairways gained. He's slightly positive as a putter on Bermuda, but he's 129th in strokes gained approach over the past 50 rounds. If you look at the data closer, You can see why. He lost 4.5 strokes from approach at the RBC Heritage, 9.3 at the Travelers in a made cut, so really racked up some bad data there. Over the past 4 starts, he has gained 4.9 from approach, then lost 2.1, gained 5.1, gained 0.3, so more up than down. He's not flawless. Nobody else. There's Webb. He's flawless. We love you, Webb. Some other guys are close to pretty flawless, but once you start digging down below 10,000, you start to run into issues. So I mean, it's not terrible. We know he should be able to hit the fairway. He should be able to putt. Has shown obvious upside at this event in the past. So if he gets like the good approach numbers that he's had, the 4.9, the 5.1, he could do some damage, but I don't know if I can fully trust that. So, because again, it's not the recent data. It's 50 rounds. He's 129th in approach, which is close to the bottom. So does Cook do anything for you this week?
Not really. I think that it's because he's 9.6. Like if he were 8.6 or something, I'd be more willing to overlook like the approach numbers. But like he's right. I think the top end of the 9,000 tier is pretty good. It's not great, but it's pretty good. I feel okay saying that. And there are guys like I actively want to use who are a little bit higher salary than him. So like I think the imperfections are excusable for lower salary guys. They're less excusable if you are $200 lower salary than Doc Redman. Like he has imperfections too. Not saying that he doesn't, but like his imperfections, I'm more willing to accept than Austin Cook's. Is that a fair way to put it?
If the question is Doc Redman or somebody else, the answer is Doc Redman.
Okay, fair enough. Doc Redman's my player picks. I'm sorry for stealing him from you, but I think that the discussion about being willing to accept imperfections at a lower salary is pertinent when we get to Tyler Duncan, who is a defending champ here. He's our final course history guy. He checks in at $8,300, and I think that's low enough where he's at least worth discussing. If you look at the 3 measured rounds last year, Duncan gained 4.9 in approach and 1.7 off the tee. He ranked 3rd in the field in strokes gained tee to green for those 3 rounds. And Duncan has 2 other trips here. He was 74th in 2018, but then 25th in 2017. And the recent the recent numbers are bad because he had a lot of missed cuts, but he's actually 5th in fairways gained and 21st in approach. The problem is he doesn't fit the accuracy plus birdies model because there haven't been a lot of birdies. We have seen him get those here in the past. So, Brandon, is that enough for you to bite on Duncan at $8,300?
The reason he doesn't get birdies is because he doesn't putt well. Over the past 50 rounds, just on all surfaces, he's 121st in strokes gained putting. And then on Bermuda specifically, over a 100-round sample, he's 153rd. Losing 0.47 strokes per round on Bermuda greens, which is very detrimental. I looked at Duncan as well. I don't see enough. I think the win odds probably make him stand out a little bit at the salary, but we know the win odds are definitely affected based on his course form or event form, I should say, because there are 2 courses. So I looked at Duncan. I didn't see enough, so I can't really get behind him.
And I think the other thing, too, is I can get guys who make birdies despite their bad putting in the similar salary tier. Like, it's Tuesday. The lineup's still locked till Thursday, but I can guarantee you by Thursday I'm going to talk myself into Kevin Streelman, whether I should or should not. So if I'm going to take bad putting, I might as well at least get a guy who's proven he can get birdies despite it being a bad putter.
Okay, so you took one of my low salaried picks. I had to pivot, and I wound up on Kevin Streelman. So
okay,
we're in this together.
What could go wrong? We will all go down together. Let's move to current form before we sing more Billy Joel and take a look at some golfers who have been good recently. Let's start things off here with that second tier because Webb is obvious. The second tier is where things get more interesting because we have some contenders there and some legitimately good golfers. And one of them is Sungjae Im because Sungjae really made a run at it on Sunday and just honestly the entire week at the Masters. And it's not a fluke because he's been doing this for a bit now. Like, he's been slowly getting better over the past 2 or so months. So talking about Sungjae's form, and let's decide if we can actually make him our number 2 guy behind Webb this week.
Yeah. I mean, if you watch the Masters closely, and anyone who is listening to this podcast and was not tuned into the Masters,
I respect it, honestly.
I respect it. I don't understand it. But, I mean, you saw a lot of Sungjae Im this past weekend. So I think he will command a lot of attention. And you can make the case for anybody who played Augusta last week, whether they made the cut, whether they were, T2, whatever it was. You can make the case that they are mentally drained. If there's a golfer who can play every single week and not be affected, it'd be Sungjae Im. It's just what he likes to do. I think,
just honestly, on those power bars, it'll be fine.
I think what hurts Sungjae the most is the time off. So he might need to get in a win before the hiatus, because I would imagine he'll just spend all of December grinding out some golf anyway. But to me, the runner-up kind of came out of nowhere. He made 4 straight cuts at events with a cut in them, but just a single finish, better than 22nd, pretty much for like months now. He was 45th at the CJ Cup, 41st at the Zozo, 50th at the Houston Open leading in. At the Houston Open, he lost 1.2 strokes off the tee, 0.4 with his approach. And honestly, that's a perfect anecdote for why one event or a small sample of data is not the best to use with golf. Because if you just looked at that, you would have said he has no shot at the Masters, and obviously was pretty dialed in. So it's very difficult to adjust for those things. So I like to look at a larger sample. And over the past 24 rounds, he is 17th in the field in strokes gained tee to green. He is 4th in strokes gained ball striking, which combines strokes gained off the tee and strokes gained approach. And he historically plays best on Bermuda. He did not have that last week. It was on bent grass. So I kind of think, though, despite all of what I said, maybe sounding like I was down on him, in this field, it's kind of hard to hate Sungjae Im unless you play that angle of fatigue at the Masters, which I don't think will affect him that much. So how are you handling Sungjae Im with his salary, pretty close to Webb Simpson's this week?
I'm also not as worried about fatigue this week because it's so close to Augusta. Like, it's in the same state.
Yeah.
So I think that, because I care about travel when it comes to NFL stuff. I care about travel. And I think travel matters, but there's not as much travel here. So I think that's actually not too bad. I don't know if he stayed in Georgia. Maybe he didn't, but still, I don't think it's too bad.
I think he has a hotel in Atlanta with his mom.
How do you know this?
They're talking about it.
Okay.
Again, Sungjae was all over.
Yeah.
Coverage.
I thought you just knew.
No.
Sungjae, your personal correspondence. Where are you staying this week? Anyway, that's strange. Regardless,
he has back and forth.
Good for Sungjae for spending time with his mom. I think that's great. I think that I like Sungjae, but I like a couple guys more, specifically Tyrrell Hatton and Russell Henley. And I don't know. I think that I'm having a hard time. I think those 3 are all really good plays, but I think Sungjae might be 3rd on that list for me. I think right now it's, I don't know. It's hard because I love Henley, but Hatton feels like the better process play. So I feel like I'm going to wind up going Hatton 1, Henley 2, Sungjae 3. Is that an egregious ranking?
Oh, no. I think you can rank all of them kind of any way you want. I would go. It's tough because you did not mention Harris English there, and I like Harris English, but I would probably go.
Well, he's a lot
right.
salaried.
I'm really high on Harris English this week.
Yeah,
but I would go Sungjae, Hatton, Henley.
Okay.
Hatton is another good example. He burned probably a lot of people. Last week, but we know the long-term form is very good, so you kind of have to factor that in. Can
we get an angry Tyrrell Hatton narrative? Is that a thing that we can make happen? It would just be in play every week. But
I think he's always pretty angry.
He's like the Hulk. I'm always angry, but maybe we can play that angle. I don't know. I think that Hatton's a good play. That's why I can't get quite as high on Sung Jae. It's also because I just like Henley a lot, but it's nothing against Sung Jae. It's just pro them, I would say. Let's talk about a golfer who is in the 10,000 range. Again, I think it's pretty good this week. That's Sebastian Munoz, and he easily could have been in the course history section because he was third here last year, but I think the form is more noteworthy for Munoz right now because he's made the cut in 10 straight events. Not all of those have had cuts, but that does include 2 majors with cuts and some FedEx Cup events. So the fields have been good, a little bit tougher than this. Again, this is not a bad field, but a little bit tougher than this. And importantly, the approach has been trending back up for Munoz. He's gained at least 1.5 on approach in 4 straight. He's topped 2.1 3 of those times, and the best surface for Munoz is Bermuda. The problem is that, again, I think he's in a loaded tier. I agree with you. Harris English is awesome. I also like Matt Fitzpatrick. So I like Munoz. I know you like Munoz more than I do, but I don't think I'm going to get to him just because I like others in that tier more. But you like Munoz more than I do. So what are your thoughts on him here specifically?
I like him. Was kind of lingering last week. Was finished 19th at the Masters. 25th in birdie or better rate gains. Like you said, he's best on Bermuda, and he's just really balanced. And I think that has value. There's not a single aspect of Munoz in his game where I feel like it's going to burn you. And this is a little anecdotal, but you need to go low here. And Munoz has been on runs lately, and I know you like Matt Fitzpatrick, but
who is averse to birdies?
He likes those tougher courses. I don't know if this suits him as well as it might suit Sebastian Munoz. So for me, someone like Munoz just stands out a little more than Fitzpatrick. I think Munoz, his salary is a little too high, but I think it's okay because I'll be punting, often enough where it doesn't hurt me too much.
Do you want to do a head-to-head bet of Munoz versus Matt Fitzpatrick?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Okay. I should mention from a note-keeping perspective, for those of you who care about our weekly head-to-head, the Bobble Hat, we are starting a new season this week. Brandon beat me, I think you said 9 straight times to close out the year?
Yes.
So Brandon won the Bobble Hat. I won our win picks because I had DJ last week, which gave me a 3-1 lead. 2-1 if you are Brandon and are worried about the PGA Championship, but it didn't matter.
Well,
it didn't matter.
You also cut off Bryson a few times when he
No. You can complain about one. I'm not going to let you complain about multiple.
The reality is I
am not as good as Jim. That's the reality that I hear. I am not as good as Jim. I agree, Brandon. I agree.
I had a
great
lot
Great
of
point.
Near hits in the spring season last year. I think Jim made some.
Do near hits get that biscuit? Do near hits put money in my pocket? Do near hits fund trips to Subway? No.
They don't.
Get out of here.
Get out of here. To Subway.
There are no each ways on this podcast, brah. So we're starting a new season, which means that this is a new Bobble Hat and a new head-to-head. So just so you're aware. Good luck. How do we get on that topic? I don't actually know. Anyway, let's move to another current. We have the head-to-head bets. Okay, are we keeping track of the head-to-head bets this year?
Yeah, I'll get them. I just got to remember.
Okay. So our first one is Munoz versus Matt Fitzpatrick. I have Matty Fitz. You have Sebastian Munoz. Let's move into our other current form golfers. Starting off with Harold Varner III. We have used Harold Varner III. It feels like a lot, or at least maybe I have recently. And we talked about how Sebastian Munoz has no glaring holes. No glaring holes in Harold Varner III, right?
If the goal of golf is to get it on the green, sure.
Yeah.
Because he can do that.
Oh, yeah.
He's 8,800, which is a really solid value. He has 3 top 30 finishes in his past 4 events. Missed the cut by a lot at the Bermuda, but has been good otherwise. Ranks second in this field in strokes gained tee to green over the past 24 rounds, trailing only your boy Russell Henley, whose salary is 11.4. But Varner's balanced with the driver, 45th in distance gained, 55th in fairways gained, 13th in birdie or better rate gained, And then you got to talk about the putting, specifically on Bermuda. He loses an average of 0.34 strokes per round on Bermuda over a 100-round sample, according to Fantasy National. Now, he's overcome that here in 2 starts with some, made cuts, but, we love Harold Varner on this podcast. We can't pretend like he will just putt well enough to make the cut. The real reason for playing him is that the tee to green game should be so good that even if he putts neutrally, which is what he's done here in his 2 attempts, he'll make the cut and have a chance for some upside. So is he a core play for you, or do you still need to pump the brakes because the birdies will be kind of automatically limited because he won't be able to drain as many putts as some other guys?
It depends on what you define as a core play. I think 30 to 40% is pretty fair for Varner, because then if he stinks, you still have 67% of your lineups where you don't have Varner. So I would say he's probably in that range where I can feel pretty good about him and I can get a healthy number of Varner lineups, but I also need to make sure that I have enough to give myself cushion in case things go awry. I think that he is one of the better plays in the 8,000 range, and as a result of that, I'm going to use him. But I think that there always needs to be a ceiling on the exposure to Varner because the potential to blow up, especially as you mentioned on Bermuda. So I think he'll wind up probably in the 30 to 40% range, which is high, obviously, for someone with his risk. But I think that's kind of as high as I can go with his drawbacks. What about you?
Yeah, I think he will probably look like a kind of a slam dunk play. I think the only slam dunk play this week is Webb.
Yeah.
I'm not saying people are considering them on the same tier or anything, but at the salary, he does stand out, but the putting is a real concern. And I think you and I have gotten a lot better over the years of realizing that putting does matter and that it won't just magically go away just because you're great at tee to green. So especially on a course where you need to convert, he should have a lot of birdie chances if the tee to green game is what it is. But if he doesn't make them, even if he makes the cut, he's going to kind of drag you down. So you're still banking on him converting, and that's a very real issue.
Yeah, so you can use Varner because good things can still happen if you're just giving yourself that many chances. If you give yourself double the chances for birdies, you can mess up a couple times and still be okay. That's why Varner's birdie or better rate is still so good, because he just gives himself so many chances. Just statistically, that's good, but it does force you to, just be mindful of your exposure. Let's talk about Sam Burns. Putting, not an issue here. This is not the type of course where we typically target Sam Burns because he's a bomber. He's not an accuracy guy, but the non-driving stats for Burns are also super interesting. We were on Burns for the Houston Open a few weeks ago, and in that one, he gained 6.5 strokes in approach, helped him finish 7th despite losing 1.5 strokes putting. And again, he is a good putter. That was the 4th time since the end of the COVID layoff that Burns has gained at least 2.3 on approach. He is also an elite Bermuda putter, which helps him make birdies. He is 103rd in fairways gained, which is not good, but he's 65th in good drive rate. So he's not absurdly erratic when he needs to be accurate. I think that's the way I'd put that. And I think that, there is a dented floor on Burns because of the driving and the potential for that to get him in trouble. But I'm still thinking he's a really good tournament play. What about you with Sam Burns here at $9,300?
Yeah, I think he's in play for an outright win bet for how good he is on Bermuda. And we've seen some guys who aren't prototypically accurate perform well here. I don't really see too many reasons to be worried about Burns. Accuracy matters here, but I think there's just kind of some of that, guys who are accurate and not long are relevant, and that always makes it seem like accuracy matters a ton. Now it does, according to Data Golf, it is more predictive of success here than usual. So I don't want to pretend like it's not, but distance can still matter. Gaining strokes off the tee can still matter. So I think Burns is probably the best play under 9,500 by a pretty good margin.
I think part of that is because that tier is not very good. I like the high 9,000 range. I don't like the low 9,000 range.
Yeah.
For win picks, I have Burns, not win picks. For player picks, I have Burns in there. I tried really hard not to double dip with him in current form and in player picks but I couldn't find anyone else I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So I think I agree that in that range, he's the number one. So as a result, I'm going to use him more. And like there are some imperfections, but he can make up for those. So I think that Sam Burns is a good play this week, and someone like I don't want to actively target him in cash just because the course fit isn't there. But if I wind up there, I'm not gonna change my roster to avoid him. I think that's what I would say. Let's check out what the bookmakers are saying for this week, and they're saying that Webb Simpson is a heavy betting favorite. He is 9-1 at FanDuel Sportsbook. Then it drops down to Tyrrell Hatton at 16-1 before we get to Russell Henley and Sung J M at 20-1. Tommy Fleetwood is 22-1 with Harris English and Matt Fitzpatrick at 27-1. Louis Westhazen and Shane Lowry check in at 31. Then we have Corey Connors, Jason Day, Joaquin Neiman off of COVID, and Sebastian Munoz rounding up the top group. They are all 33-1. So looking at the win odds here, Brandon, after Webb, things do get pretty flat. Does that push you towards a balanced roster, or are we trying to get in Hatton, Sung Jae, or Henley in most lineups?
In addition to Webb?
Yeah.
I would say it's hard. It's hard to have a firm take right now, just because the value is appealing enough where I think it's possible, but you might want to kind of go more with that balanced approach with Webb, like a Webb plus balance, because Tyrrell Hatton is great. Sung J M is great. Russell Henley is in really good form, but it just depends on how you feel about the value plays. I think you have to kind of do it the right way, which to me would be locking in Webb in about 70% of your lineups probably, and then making sure you're not overexposed to any of the values who do bring with them a lot of risk. So if I'm building 10 lineups, I'd probably just take a chance on Webb and one of the studs, and then try to hit the right 4-ish like value plays. But I think if you're building a lot of lineups, they both constructions make sense, which I know is very rambling, but it all comes down to whether you think Webb wins or not, basically.
No, I agree with you though. I think that's the right way to play things, where you vary your roster construction. Like if I have 70% of my lineups on Webb, I might go like half of those with one of Hatton, Sung Jae, or Tyrrell Hatton. Actually, no, I'd probably go more than that, just because like I kind of want to use all three. And if I go half, so much math. If I have 35% of my lineups with one of them, that means that I can't have more than like 15% of any of them. So I think that I would need to go a little bit heavier than half. And I think that's the way I'll view things this week. So maybe if I have like my most common construction, we Webb plus one of those three, but it's not going to be locked in for me. And I think that's the way I'm viewing things here.
What helps me is I'm a little lower on those three guys than you.
Okay, sure.
I'm higher on Harris English and Sebastian Munoz, so that saves me some salary. Now, there are some guys in like the 8,000 range who are worth it. We talked about the low 9,000 not being that appealing. So
right.
I do think that there's a lot of viability in plugging in Webb and one of your favorite other studs, just because the 9,000 range is what it is. But, historically, like there's a lot of appeal in just building around those golfers who hover around 10,000 because they still have a lot of win equity. They can get overlooked. So it's really hard to like fade Webb. So I think Webb plus balance will probably be at this point what I do most, skipping over Hatton, Henley, and Sung Jae in a pretty solid portion of my lineups. So
you would rank English highest of the guys at 11,000 or lower?
With the salary, yeah, probably.
Okay, I go English 1, Matty Fitz 2, and then Munoz 3. I'm assuming you have Munoz and Fitzpatrick flipped?
Yeah, I'm not that into Fitzpatrick this week.
Okay. Just when he burns you, because he beats Munoz head-to-head, don't come crying to me. That's all I got to say. Movement. What have we seen from a movement perspective since things opened yesterday? There's actually been some noteworthy movement right at the top of the field here.
Yeah, I'll start with guys whose odds have lengthened or worsened. Sung J M from 16-1 to 20-1 on FanDuel Sportsbook. Tommy Fleetwood 18-20. Louis Westhazen 27-31. Jason Day 29-33. Corey Connors and Sebastian Munoz, 31-33, which is small at that point, but it's noteworthy. Andy Sullivan and Bernd Wiesberger, 55-80, and then Charles Schwartzel, 65-80. But if we look at guys whose odds have shortened, Webb did move from 10-1 to 9-1. That's definitely noteworthy whenever the odds are that short to begin with. Tyrrell Hatton, 18-16. Your boy Russell Henley, 27-20. Brian Harmon, 50-41. Our boy Doc Redman, 65-50. Mackenzie Hughes, 65-55. Simmons, 80-70. Zach Johnson, 80-55. Austin Cook, 100-65. So I know it's a lot, but I think those are all pretty significant in a field that is a little bit wide open behind Webb in like the next 3 or 4.
Is the Johnson? I know you like Johnson, so I'm not trying to like talk down on this, but like, is the Johnson movement like course history related, or like, because that's a big move, from 80 to 55.
He's been good. His irons have been good.
Yeah, he's fine, but like 55 is a pretty short number.
I mean, 2 top 10s the past 3 years with RSM. We know he's accurate. I think he fits the archetype. Made the cut at the Masters on the number, because I was sweating that one.
Yeah. And we talked about the Austin Cook movement before. That's likely just because people are betting him as being a past champion at this event. So keep that in mind. Movement's good, but when you can figure out why the movement is there, and it may not be the most predictive movements,
Movement's good unless you're Zach Johnson, because Jim's right out.
I mean, it's just I was kind of surprised by it.
Yeah, it's sizable.
It's a big move. Which lower salary golfers, speaking of Zach Johnson, have odds that stand out to you?
If you look at like 95 and below, just because we don't love that range, Zach Johnson is at 9,500 on FanDuel. He's 55-1. Ches Reavie, Sepp Straka are 65-1, and is 94's mid 9,000s, right?
Yeah, I think 93 to 97 is mid.
Okay, so then Ches Reavie and Sepp Straka in the mid 9,000s.
Good.
65-1. Harold Varner 70-1 at 8,800. Sam Burns, Joel Damon, Matt Wallace, all 70-1 as well. Then if you bump down and look at guys whose odds or salary is 9,000 or below, we have a cluster at 80-1. Henrik Norlander, Matt Kuchar, Russell Knox, Brant Snedeker, Patton Kazire, all 80-1, and then Matthew Neesmith is 90-1.
Yeah, Henrik Norlander is someone who's in my player picks. Pretty excited about him. I think that number makes a lot of sense, and I am into it for sure. Weather for this weekend, winds will be elevated from the jump on Thursday, sitting at around 17 miles per hour throughout, and there is a slight chance of precipitation in the later afternoon. Friday, winds will still be elevated, but a bit lower, down to around 13 miles per hour the entire day. So we talked about the Seaside course most likely being the one that is more impacted by weather. I think the right way to play that is to use or bump up the guys who are playing the Seaside course on Friday, because the wind does seem to be lower those days. I think that's probably the way I'd play this. Like from a tee time perspective, it doesn't matter because the winds look like they'll be constant throughout the entire day. But I think there is an angle to play here where you bump up the guys who are playing Seaside on Friday versus those playing it on Thursday as a result of the wind. Winds will also be above 10 miles per hour over the weekend. So I think that it's also a good week to filter in wind splits, which you can get at Fantasy National. You can check the Windy AF box, which there isn't a huge sample on, but it's big enough where we can at least get a glimpse. I have tee to green numbers in wind in my sheet for this week just because I want to make sure guys aren't bombing. A lot of those will be in tougher fields, like because you think about like the, windy AF situation, it's probably going to be sometimes like overseas and stuff like that. So just keep that in mind. We're not going to get a great sample, but it helps to have it on there at least. Any difference for you, Brandon, when it comes to wind this week?
I listen to you on wind generally. You do weather. I just in my past experience, I try to predict weather and it can burn me. I think it's very important to try to get that like automatic leg up if it hits the right way, but I've just been on the other end of it where the delay is not at the exact time I think it is, and then all of my golfers get ruined. But I think with wind being a little more predictable than something like rain, I think that there's more merit to factor it in this week.
Okay, let's dive into the player picks then for the RSM Classic, starting off with the studs on FanDuel. Brandon, who are you targeting in the upper tier on FanDuel for this week?
So we don't need to talk about Webb. I like Sungjae, I think, the most of the other guys, but I want to talk about Harris English at 11,000. He's the next favorite play of mine in this range. I think will probably just be overlooked. He rates out 16th in Bermuda putting. He's 8th in strokes gained tee to green. Has missed 3 of the past 4 cuts, which is a little worrisome, but I think that people will maybe use that as a reason not to play him. And if you dig back, his form, leading into those events was not really on par with what he's doing now. And that's a huge factor in looking at course form that I think gets overlooked because it's hard to do. It's easy with Fantasy National. It's not an advertisement, but they do make it quite easy to figure out. But 3 top 30s before that at the RSM. So, who's to say that he won't find that form now that he's golfing better?
Yeah, and I think that the appeal in English is the balance. You were talking about that with Munoz. I think that it's a much better balance with English than Munoz, which is why I prefer English, and I'd rank him first in this tier. I think that he's great. But I also want to talk Russell Henley in the tier above that because obviously, again, Webb is number 1, but I feel like Henley at a non-bomber course is someone I always want to get to. He's 14th in fairways gained the past 50 rounds per Fantasy National, and also ranked first in approach. Even though he's not long, he has still gained strokes off the tee in 9 of 12 events since the end of the COVID layoff. And he should be even better than that here with distance not being a thing. Henley has 2 top 5s in that, or 5 top 10s in that span. They've been 2 top 5s. Both those have been pretty recent. The 2 top 5s have both come during the swing season. So Henley is not a good putter. I think that's why you can definitely justify going others above him. But Bermuda is his best surface. And I think it's hard for me not to love him here at 11.4. Brandon, you said you were lowest on Henley out of that trio at the top. What's the big push away for you? Is it the putting or something else?
It's just – sorry. I was looking at that tier, and we did not really talk about Tommy Fleetwood or Jason Day even a little bit.
I didn't really feel the desire to.
Yeah. So I just got a little distracted there. I think it's just more that I love Sungjae on Bermuda. I love what his irons can be, and I love that he's a golfer who I feel like can just rack up birdies. And then with Hatton, I think it's just long-term form being – in a little bit of a different stratosphere than Henley. So it's less about Henley specifically and more about the other two being more appealing.
Okay, fair enough. So let's go through our bet here because you've got Munoz as your second player pick. I've got Matt Fitzpatrick. So you talk me through Munoz, and then I will sell the people on why Matt Fitzpatrick is a better play.
Okay. So Munoz had some screen time at Augusta last week, finishing 19th. The reason that we've both liked Munoz, and for some reason Jim now hates him, but he's just a balanced golfer. He has solid stats all across the board. 25th in birdie or better rate, 13th in opportunities gained, which is a Fantasy National stat that's basically just birdie chances. His best putting surface is Bermuda by a pretty big gap, 35th in the field on that surface. Did finish 3rd here last year. I don't really see reasons to be out on Munoz. So talk to me about Fitzpatrick.
It's not that I'm out on Munoz. I'm just in on Matty Fitz because we joke about him being bad as Matt Fitzpatrick. Maybe you should try the Matty angle. I don't know. But he's still been solid recently. I think he should benefit with distance not being a factor here because in 13 PGA Tour events since the end of the COVID layoff, Fitzpatrick has 3 top 10s and 5 top 15s. He has gained at least 2.7 on approach in 5 of those as well. He ranks 4th in Bermuda putting. Easily his best surface. He is a really, really good Bermuda putter, and the putting helps him rank 11th, and birdies are better gained even without the plus distance. We talk about him, being more of a grinder, a par guy, but he grades out well, and birdies are better gained too. He's just 10-9 I'm not opposed to some balanced lineups here as mentioned. And I think that I need to find some cut makers, and jumping down to Fitzpatrick at 10-9 helps me better be able to find cut makers in the value tier. So that's why I like Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just lingering hatred towards him from when he was more of a Molinari type.
No, I mean, I get it. I understand it. He's accurate. He should putt well. The ball striking is pretty much there. I don't know. It's probably still a bias of mine not to go with Fitzpatrick at a course where you got to kind of be 20 under. So now if it is windy and a little more difficult, I think that plays into his favor, but I don't know. I still think I'm going to lean Munoz.
Okay, you can be wrong. That's fine. I look forward to winning our first bet of this new calendar year. Let's move down to the mid range. Who do you have between 9,000 and 10,000? We're actually staying within those parameters for once.
Just to clarify, we started this late last year, but our podcast bets were 14-9 in favor of me. So,
I mean, but it's done. It's a new year, baby. We're 0-0 in the bobblehead. I have new life. I was sandbagging at the end to throw you off.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
when I put who missed the cut for me last week? Oh my gosh, I have no idea who missed the cut for me.
Wait, for your win picks?
My bobble hat. Someone missed the cut. I don't remember who it was. Anyway, when I picked that
because it didn't really matter.
Yeah, but I was sandbagging. I gotta make you feel a false sense of confidence.
Okay,
so enjoy your winnings while they last.
Yeah. So I would have listed Jim's 2 loves here, but I can't. So I'm gonna go with. This is not an indictment on Taylor Gooch that I wouldn't list him here if I could go with 2 other guys, but Taylor Gooch I think is a good play. This upper 9K range is pretty appealing, so that does kind of make a balanced approach pretty fun, especially if you don't play Webb, if you're really going to degaff it. But, like I said, Gooch is more than just if I have to, list someone else here. I think he's kind of in the same tier as Doc Redman. He was 23rd at this event last year after 2 missed cuts, but he's fairly long. He's fairly accurate. He's pretty balanced then overall. However, and if you look at balanced, I mean, he's 55th or better in all 3 tee to green stats, which you don't look at 55th and be like, oh, that's great, but he's also not bad at anything. He doesn't really struggle with anything. Taylor Gooch is somebody I've been playing and kind of betting for a while now because of that consistency. So I think that can help you rack up birdies. It can help you save par. It can kind of work in every angle. So I do like Taylor Gooch at 98.
Yeah, I think he's a fair play. But the one you were lamenting that I had is Doc Redman. The approach for Redman has been a bit more erratic than it was when he first came out of the COVID layoff, but that's because he was gaining 15 strokes in approach in every event. But he's shown the ability to hit the highs still, because we don't have shot link data from the Bermuda, but Redman did finish 4th there. He also gained 7.7 on approach at the Safeway in the beginning of September. He's another guy who benefits from a non-bomber course because he's 19th in fairways gained as opposed to 81st in distance. He is terrible around the green, and that's a known negative. But I just have a hard time not loving him here, despite that, with everything else in his favor. So that's what puts me on Redman. What draws you towards him, Brandon?
So I think the thing with Redman is it's a course where you got to go low. And yes, getting up and down to save par, it matters. But if you're relying on the around the green game, he's probably not in contention. That's kind of the general vibe I get from anytime you got to go 17 to 22 under around the green is not going to be what gets you there necessarily. It can help you if you hole out and that kind of stuff, but it's not really one where it's super important. The thing that gets me on Redman is just the ball striking. He can pick apart a lot of courses, accurate as well, and he's average in Bermuda putting, which is enough, so long as he's not terrible, which is what we get from some golfers. So there's really no real red flags for me with Redman from what he'll need to do to contend.
I will also mention that this is the first time I've said this, I think. I don't hate Denny McCarthy at $9,800 as well. accurate birdie maker. We don't need to talk about the way in which he makes his birdies, but he gets them regardless. So I don't hate the idea of Denny McCarthy, and I will have him in some of my lineups.
I don't hate Brendan Todd either.
I thought about that too.
You put him on Bermuda.
It's the exact same thought process as McCarthy. He's accurate and he can make birdies via a short game. So it's the same thought process.
It's a little bit better with Brendan Todd. The irons are noticeably better. They're not. Neither of them are good.
No.
But yeah, I think that I would go. Do you want to make that bet?
No, because I think they're pretty even. I don't have enough conviction in it to go with it, because I think that I actually feel good about Fitzpatrick being above Munoz. I think that Todd and McCarthy are literally the same dude. If you told me they were actually the same human being, I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Makes sense.
All right. I'm just out here trying to make bets, but
sorry. Not here though. Who else do you like in this mid-range?
Your arch nemesis, Zach Johnson.
He's not my nemesis. He's a Midwest guy. We can be best friends. I think he's from Iowa. How can I hate Zach Johnson? 9,500.
I mentioned last week. I recommend.
You did. You were on him last week.
It was fine.
Yeah, I mean, he made the cut.
Look, he was a salary saver. He's not quite that this week at 95, but the approach numbers for Johnson in recent events have been really good, and he's old enough where you should be wary of small samples, but at tracks like this, because there are two courses, this is what Zach Johnson can do. He has 2 top 10s in the past 3 years at the RSM. He can hit fairways. He can make some putts. He's 23rd in approach now in this field over the past 50 rounds. 6th in good drive rate. I chose that because he's really good at getting greens in regulation, which it can be a misleading stat, but I think if you use a large enough sample, the greens kind of average out. So I think he fits well with the archetype. If I had to pick somebody else here outside of the 2 you picked in Gooch, Johnson would probably be the first place I look, because I like Brendan Todd fine, but the irons are not quite there.
Yeah, I don't think that Johnson's an egregious play. I just think that the movement was more wild than it should have been. I think that if I had to pick a second person not named Sam Burns in this range, it might be Johnson. So fair enough. My pick though is Sam Burns. As mentioned, I'd like to not go here in cash games just because it's not a great tier, and the archetype fit isn't there, but I think he's a great tournament play, a really good tournament play. He ranks 4th in the field in birdies or better gained. He's also 4th in Bermuda putting the past 100 rounds. He's shown the ability to have spike weeks with his approach. That's kind of been a negative in his game for a while, has been his approach, but it's been getting better, and he's had those spike weeks, which is good. If he has one of those here, he might be able to make up for being, a little bit erratic off the tee. Among the guys in this tier, it just feels like Burns is the one with the most realistic path to a top 5 finish. So, like I said, if I have $9,300 left in my cash game lineup and I don't want to go off anyone else, I am okay putting Burns in there. So I think it wouldn't shock me if Burns wound up being in our bobblehead lineup, but not a priority for me. What are your thoughts on Sam Burns before we move on here?
I'm apparently way higher on him than you are.
Oh, really? Okay. So you think he's a cash game play?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Because at that salary, what else are you getting that?
Yeah, I think that's my issue, though, is I can get around the salary too. But I also don't think I need to with Burns. I can go there for sure. I just don't, I don't think he's I think that Webb is the first guy I lock in. I don't think Burns is in that tier.
No, but
okay.
You can't play everyone above 10,000, and I'm not saying that you're implying that, but
right.
You got to pick someone down here, and I think Burns, all things considered, stands out enough, and I think the floor is high enough.
Okay. Value plays. Who do you have below $9,000 for this week?
I'm going to go with Martin Laird. 8,600. Won the Shriners 2 events ago, which was on bent grass, but he's actually a significantly better Bermuda putter. And he's 18th in strokes gained tee to green, 14th off the tee, 26th in approach, 15th in opportunities gained. I mean, I guess we're getting potentially a good ball striker who putts well on Bermuda. So,
I've proposed worse plays than Martin Laird. I'll say that.
It gets bad this week, I'll say.
Yeah. I don't think he's a terrible play, though. I think it's a good recommendation. I prefer Harold Varner III. And as you mentioned, the putting is a big issue, but he's overcoming that often enough for me to feel good about him here, because he ranks 13th in birdies or better gained the past 50 rounds, and that does count putting. that doesn't show the times where he'll bomb a hole due to pad putting. Like birdies are better only shows the good. It doesn't show like the doubles and stuff like that. And I think that's part of the reason why it can be semi-misleading. But, I'll take that over a par maker in DFS every time, he says as he endorses Matt Fitzpatrick. But Varner's also 5th in the field in approach the past 50 rounds. He should be able to gain plenty there. 55th in fairways gained, but he's also 14th in good drive rate. So I feel like when he wants to be accurate, Varner can be. And I think that when you blend everything together, he's worth his salary and more than that at $8,800. So I think that HV3 is a very good play. What about you, Brandon?
Okay, so they're not the same salary, but if you have to pick one for a cash game, is it Varner or Burns? Because to me, it's Burns.
Yeah, I think it's Burns over Varner.
Okay.
Like if I have the salary to do that, yeah.
But I'm saying, yeah, but like,
okay,
salary considered, I still think it's Burns.
No, I think you're right. That's a fair comparison to make. He's like they're close enough. I'd agree with you there.
It's less of a one 1v1 and more of like a
archetype.
Well, no, it's also like, are you okay with Harold Varner in a cash game, or are you going to try to find a way to get to Sam Burns, or do you treat them similarly enough where you're just going to settle with Varner?
I think that's very fair. I think that's a good way to look at it too. So, who else do you have in the value tier?
You alluded to it, Kevin Stroman, 8,000. Obvious drawbacks here, at least one drawback, which is putting on Bermuda. 138th in the field, which is terrible. Loses 0.23, although I wouldn't be surprised if he lost 2.23. So almost a quarter of a stroke per round over the past 100 on Bermuda, but he's 28th in strokes gained off the tee, primarily from accuracy, which fits. He's 22nd in approach, 17th in birdie or better rate. He's gone cut 37th, 17th cut at the RSM, which is not great, but there have been spike weeks for him recently. He has 3 top 10 finishes and 15 starts since the reboot. If you're going this low, you could do way worse. So at least hope for some upside.
I think Stroman's in play for sure. And like using him does give you a lot of flexibility, and I think that's attractive. So I think he's fine. Like I said, if I had to go somewhere else in this tier, it'd be him too. So I agree with you there. I also like Henrik Norlander as a value play. He's generally a bad putter, and like Doc Redman, pretty terrible around the green, and that's why he's $8,600, and he's not, a super short win odds guy. And he's also missed a butt ton of cuts recently, which is not great. But one of the made cuts was a 4th place finish, so he has upside, and he gets that upside via ball striking. He's 6th in the field in fairways gained and 20th in approach the past 50 rounds. The putting should be less bad here than usual. His best surface is Bermuda. Actually ranks 40th in Bermuda putting the past 50 rounds. So I think that what I like about Norlander is that the weaknesses he does have should be less glaring here outside of the around the green play. And I can live with that for $8,600. Brandon, are you in on Henrik Norlander this week?
Yeah, it gets a bit of a bump on Bermuda. The ball striking has been better than their recent results have been. 2 top 10s here over the past 4. So, I think he's one of the better plays in this range, and I would prefer him to Kevin Stroman, but 600 kind of goes a long way.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think that Stroman, he does make things pretty easy. I would rather get to Norlander and Varner, but if I really don't like what I'm using in the mid-range, I'm okay jumping down to Stroman and using him instead to kind of avoid that range. So that's where I'm at for this week. All right, win picks. Again, if you missed last week's podcast, why are you listening to this one and not the Masters? But anyway, if you missed it last week, we're changing up the win picks where we're actually just picking them relative to odds. It's basically like if you bet 1 unit on 2 different golfers, and we get whatever the profit is at the end of the year as our win picks. So Brandon, we can overlap, which means it doesn't matter which golfers you pick. Let me get 2 in my mind first, just so I know, so I'm not copying you. Let me just get my 2 in my mind first.
I'll vamp. I have 4 jotted down as guys that I would consider betting.
Okay.
I'll figure out where I actually go. But I mean, I think there are 4 at value because historically one of us would have just taken Webb, even though I wouldn't bet Webb at 9-1.
Right.
So we're mixing.
Okay.
Because now the thing is I like Sam Burns at 70-1, but 71 goes a long way on 1 unit. But Is it more because you got to factor in the game theory if it's a head-to-head betting contest? So
I can't decide between two guys, and I might just take both of them. I think I will. So yeah, go ahead. You go first.
No, you go. I don't want to skew yours because I already have my 4.
Okay, so I think I'm just going to go with both Harris English and Matt Fitzpatrick. What?
I did not expect you to take Harris English.
Why?
I just didn't seem like you were that into him.
I ranked him first in the tier. What do you mean?
I don't know, man.
Also, at 27-1 is different than if I'm playing him at 11,000 compared to Tyrrell Hatton.
It's a very different thing. English was one of my 4. I also have Sam Burns jotted down. Kevin Kisner at 34 was interesting, and then Doc.
I thought about Kisner as well.
Doc Redman at 50 was.
I thought about Doc as well.
I think those are just the best values right now.
I thought about Sam Burns too. So I literally thought about everyone on your list, but I wound up on English and Fitzpatrick.
So I'm most likely to bet Harris English to 27. I know we can go the same. I don't really want to do that if I can avoid it. So I will go with Kisner at 34.
Okay.
And then I'll go. I'll go Doc at 50 over Burns at 70. Man, I can't believe you picked Harris English, and I know I could pick him. I know I don't have to. I have no right. I have no right.
You can't tilt this. Yeah. Let's not start this already.
It's just lame that the second week into it, we're picking the same guy.
I mean, but like that means that they're the best. They're the best betting values we see.
All right, I'll go with Harris English then.
Over Redmond
Kisner.
Or over Kisner? Okay, so you have English and I forgot it. Redmond, right?
Doc Redman at 50.
Okay, and I have English and Fitzpatrick. So when Matty Fitz hoists that trophy, I don't know what the trophy is for the RSM. It could be like a clock or something that you can't pick up. But like when he wins it, I'm going to feel extra good because I get that win over Munoz, I'd assume, based on FanDuel points, and I'll get this win pick right.
Yeah.
Can't touch it.
Yeah, I should have, yeah.
Any final thoughts for you on this event before we give Matt Fitzpatrick the trophy?
I'm just looking forward to building a lead in the bobble hat again, just like I did in the snake draft for NFL.
You suck. You got the snake draft lead because DeAndre Hopkins caught a Hail Mary.
No.
Calm down.
No.
Yes, it is.
That's what you always do to me. No.
Yeah, fair enough. No, you're right. Okay, that is all that we have for today, but we'll be back on Thursday to preview week number 11 in the NFL. Again, next week, a crazy jam-packed schedule. No PGA next week, there's no event. We'll have 3 Heat Check podcasts, though, 3 NFL ones, Monday at 9, Tuesday at 10, and Wednesday at 10, and again, Thursday at 10 this week as well for the Week 11 preview. If you want our Week 10 recap podcast, that is posted on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Also, our Listener League is up. Go to FanDuel.com/league/listener league. You can also go to the Week 10 recap podcast post up on numberFire.com. There is a link there. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gdula13, GDULA13.
You will find me victory lapping Matt Fitzpatrick's win at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck with your lineups for the RSM Classic. We'll talk to you again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.